Welcome, everyone. We're really excited to have you here. I'm gonna set the stage for this conversation, but just briefly, I'm Zoe, co-founder and CEO here at Common Trust. I think a lot of folks here know us, but we work with business owners at every stage of their employee ownership journey, everything from learning about it for the first time to understanding what it might look like for them to actually going through the process and fully implementing a transition to employee ownership. We've worked with businesses as small as 10 employees and up to tens of thousands. So we have seen the entire gamut of what this can look like. And we've seen, a lot of what works, where there's friction and where there are kind of hard lessons learned that should be passed on to the next generation of owners who are exploring this. Um, Before I get started, I'll just share a little bit of context for today's session. We do these sessions about every quarter. Our owners session is really a session dedicated to sharing the perspective of business owners and teams who have actually made this transition to employee ownership. We find that learning from folks who are actually in the trenches operating this model is one of the best ways to learn about employee ownership. So that's why we do these sessions with folks every couple months. Today's session, I'm actually really excited for. We were talking about this earlier before everyone hopped on, but we have had founders in these sessions and we have next generation leadership in these sessions. And this is the first time we actually have both in the same conversation. So I think this is going to be a really exciting conversation and a great way to hear both perspectives at the same time. So I'm excited to introduce David Seaton, founder of LiveOak Living Community, and Rachel Medina, LiveOak's CEO. They're going to be sharing their founder successor experience transitioning, both in terms of that like succession transition, but also LiveOak becoming an employee-owned company through an employee ownership trust. Um, I would say, having talked to these two, I think David, we first met at Steward's Circle a couple years ago in Texas, and Rachel,
Correct.
you and I at our next Steward Circle in Indianapolis. But I think one of the things that really sticks out to me about their story is just the level of intention and thoughtfulness and pacing behind their transition. It wasn't necessarily quick or turnkey, but I think it was really intentional the way that they approached this. So I'm going to kick us off with a series of kind of prepared questions to guide this conversation. But at the end of this session, we will have time to answer questions from the audience. So please drop questions into the chat throughout the conversation. We'll be monitoring those, so we'll be able to surface some of those up at the end of this conversation. So let's get started. David, I want to start with
All right.
you. I want to hear a little bit about Live Oak Living, but what you told me before we hopped on, it sounds like you guys are just coming off a pretty momentous occasion at the company from last night.
Yeah, absolutely. We last night was our it was our second what we call town hall meeting where we meet with the employee owners. And just to give you context, we have about 47 employees, but 32 of them are employee owners. So two-thirds of our employees are employee owners. But we had our second town hall meeting last night, and it was our very first profit sharing distribution. So it's kind of neat that this falls on the heels of that. And that's one of the reasons why I came down. I'm in town is so that we have this meeting and follow up with you today. So yeah, last night was a good milestone mark. We're now exactly 10 months into our EOT. We started April 1st. So this was our 10-month mark.
A big, momentous occasion, certainly worth celebrating in person. So tell us about the business. How did it begin? What does it look like today?
Um, we, for those who don't know, we work with people, with adults with cognitive disabilities. So traumatic brain injury, mental illness, mental health issues, developmental disabilities, autism. So anybody has a long-term disability, and we provide long-term living in that arena. And my background started in 1980. I started a company with my father, who was a psychiatrist, and this kind of leads into how we developed this company. But it was actually employee owned also. I've only had two jobs in my life, and they were both employee owned. Our other company was private stock. The employees owned the stock in the company. And we had that up until 1998. And at the time, never heard of an EOT or even an ESOP, but we knew of no other option. So we did the typical route. We start trying to figure out, okay, how do we sell the company to transition? My father was looking to retire and had some family members who had health issues, and we were in a place where we couldn't afford to buy out the stock. So we started looking around and meeting with big companies and venture capital companies and private equity companies. And of course, they all said the most wonderful, great things. And we love you and everything's going to stay the same. And so we sold the company in 1998. And I had a 5-year non-compete guaranteed contract with them. And I lasted 2 weeks. And the first meeting I had with this venture capital company, the vice president flew down and we met for the very first time. And I vividly remember sitting there at the table and he said, let me make something perfectly clear. We've got ways that we do things. And if people don't do it the way we want it, they need to be fired immediately. Am I clear? I said, pretty clear. Thanks for letting me know. So this is an about face of what we've been told for the last 18 months, but it was very clear. So I went home that night and I had 2 small children at the time, and who are now grown up. But my wife said, well, how'd the meeting go? And I said, well, I guess it went okay. I'm resigning in the morning. And that's what I did. The next morning I resigned. So that really, when I started LiveOak in 2002, that's what led towards this idea of, all right, what are we going to do for a succession plan? And how do we do it? And you got a deep implant of what not to do, what you don't want to do. And obviously what I didn't want to do is repeat what I experienced in 1998 with the company. And needless to say, the company went downhill real fast. Employees left, residents left. It's a kind of it's not even the same company anymore. It's maybe 20% of what it was when we sold it. So needless to say, it was not a good transition, and a company that we'd built over 20 years did not survive the transition well at all. So, and really we started this, the EOT process 5 years ago. It was kind of around the COVID time when, I hit the milestone of 60 years old, and you start trying to figure out, all right, what's going to happen next? What's our transition going to be, and how do we do it? And so that's really kind of what began thinking about the process, because you either do it through omission or commission. It's going to happen. And the thing that I realized was I had about 30 years on all of my directors, and I had about 40 years on all my direct staff. And that's not a good thing when you start thinking about succession plan, that, okay, I need to figure out something different, because obviously they're going to be running the company well after me.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like a lot of what you learned in terms of thinking about long-term for LiveOak actually came from seeing what not to do. Tell us a little bit about, as you thought about what not to do, what to do, what were some of the kind of like mission or culture or values that you wanted to see protected over the long term?
Well, obviously, the most important ingredient is what that vice president brought up to me. I believe the most important thing was the employees. We're in the business of long-term living with people with long-term disabilities. So it's a pretty onerous responsibility when family members kind of give you the keys to their car or keys to their house, called their family member, and says, I trust you're going to take care of my loved one forever. And many of them are 30, 35, 40 years old. So you're going to be their home and their family for the next 25, 30, 40 years. And so that weighed pretty heavy. As I did not feel comfortable with the idea that somehow we're just going to sell a commodity. We're not a used car dealership. We're not even a restaurant. We're dealing with human beings and humans' lives. Not only that, but also the employees. So the big issue was, all right, how do we were running a good organization. The company was doing well. And obviously what we wanted to do was retain the mission, the vision, our approach, our philosophy, all the things. And because of that, there wasn't a big need to change things, which is exactly what would happen if you sold to someone else or you sold to venture capital. And you could no longer guarantee kind of the promise that you gave to these families and the people that you're working with. But I knew full well I could trust the employees who are already here. They've already been here for 3, 5, 10, Rachel's case, 13 years now. I could trust them. So then it became, okay, how do I get it to them? And that became the driver.
Yep. Yep. Rachel, I want to turn to you. Tell us a little bit about your path into the CEO role, and what does that responsibility mean to you as stewarding the company?
Yeah, so as David said, I've been with the company 13 years. I met David on campus at Texas State. He came to speak to the class, and I was a senior in college and trying to figure out what I wanted to do for my career, and learned about LiveOak. It was such an exciting opportunity that I didn't even realize was in my backyard. He talked about the mission and vision, and I emailed him after that and said, I really want a job. And so he said, you can come answer phones. So I started there. I graduated a week later from college, and I started at LiveOak answering phones and slowly worked my way up. I've had just about every position in the company. So when I think about stewardship and ownership, I have kind of been able to assume different levels of responsibility over the last 13 years. And I feel already, as someone who's been around for so long and now taking on the CEO role, that I am an owner of the company. I put a lot of time and effort and energy into this. When David was looking at, okay, what are we going to do for a transition plan, a transition strategy, that was really scary for me, because I wasn't sure what that meant for my future. If he sold the business, I knew from his story that I probably would not be around very much longer. So I was really excited to hear about ownership, because it was a way for me to continue what I've already been doing in running and owning the company, and to share that with the rest of the employees.
Totally. So let's talk a little bit about that exploration process, because David, you kind of teed up for us what made you think about this in your past, but tell us about that exploration phase. What were the questions that you were trying to answer as you thought about the future of the business?
Well, one was just how is it going to continue? One of the things that I did was begin moving kind of a younger generation that I thought could run the company into a position to run things. And so part of that process is kind of getting the right people on the bus and getting the wrong people off the bus for part of this transition. So in 2021, I bought out about 25% of, I bought out every one of our senior staff, the directors and the managers and everyone else, in order to create kind of permeability and upward movement for the people who I thought could run the company. So that was part of the process, but not knowing how and who I was going to do it. How were we going to do the transition? Then I was talking a lot with our banker and then the trust officer about options and what could I do to transition the company. And now we're getting into 2022, and my trust company at the bank put me in charge with in contact with a company called Ready for Next, and that's what they do. They do succession planning. And so what was good about this and meeting with them is, for the first time, it became real. And now I'm talking to people about leaving and about transitioning the company, and doing all these questionnaires and looking at the finances and valuing the company and all these different things. And also I pulled in Rachel and two other people into the meetings too. So all of us were kind of deer in the headlights. It's like, oh my gosh, this is really going to happen. I guess that's what it feels like for women to have babies. It's oh my gosh, this really is going to happen. So but that really did set the stage well to kind of go, okay, they're making recommendations and they're evaluating our company and how it works and everything else. And all they talked about for the 6 months we worked together were sell out to someone in the industry, someone that's in healthcare already, sell out to venture capital, sell out to private equity. And then they talked a lot about ESOPs. And so we bought all the book on ESOPs and looked into it and go, oh my God, this sounds heavy. This sounds regulated. This sounds like a lot of stuff that we don't want to run our company that way. And on top of it, our staff are so young, we have a hard enough time getting them to sign up for our simple IRA plan, which is a 3% match, because they're 23, 24, 25. They're young. They're not thinking that way. Well, ESOPs are geared around the idea of retirement plan. I also wasn't crazy about the idea of writing a check when someone leaves, paying them to leave the company. I didn't like that idea. And I kid you not, 15 seconds before they hung up the phone on our exit interview, they were getting frustrated with me because nothing was working. The guy who runs it says, well, you might look into an EOT. And hung up. And I went, okay, there goes the Google search. And started looking at into EOTs. And people have asked me before, how long did it take you to decide this is the route you want to go? I said, about 30 seconds. When I read about an EOT, I think I walked in her office and said, this is it. We found it. This is it.
What stood out to you?
The flexibility, how it was structured, the employees owning it, the profit sharing, I mean, everything about it. And to date, there's been, it's even gotten easier as we've gone along and better as we've gone along, not harder and more complex. And so to me, it was kind of like, pottery and molding clay. You can make it anything you want to be. And that's the beautiful thing about it. So exactly what I wanted to do with the company, this gave me a path to do it. That was pretty seamless. It was pretty easy. It was pretty inexpensive. And it accomplished exactly what I wanted to do and passing the baton to the very people who knew how to run the company and were running the company. And one of the things, just to back up a little bit in our transition process that helped us a lot also, is during COVID, I also bought a COVID house, bought a house up in the mountains. And so for the first summer, I was gone 3 months. The second summer, I was gone 4 months. The third summer, I was gone 5 months. Well, that meant she was running it. So we had this real natural process of me being gone, me being absent, just available by phone, and her running the day-to-day and dealing with all the stuff that goes down. So we had this beautiful trial period that was going on that became a real natural time to experience what it would feel like, but also experience what it's like to run the company. So when it was time to pull the trigger, I was real clear on the idea that they can run the company, and definitely with Rachel as the CEO could run the company. She became the executive director in 2021. So, we had 4 solid years of her being the executive director before our EOT, and she became the CEO, took my role in April 1st. And that's probably the most important thing that I can emphasize is you've got to have someone to pass the baton to. You have to. You're not giving the baton to a company. You got to have a person. You got to have that person that you have confidence and has the experience to captain the ship. And if you don't have that, then you kind of got to wait until you do. And you got to find your unicorn like Rachel, the person that you have confidence in that can do it and can be there in the good, the bad, and the ugly to run things and stays around through it to be able to do this. Otherwise, I don't know how you can do it if you don't have that person you can pass the baton to.
Yeah, so I want to talk about some of the sequencing there. So it sounds like you were both doing this gradual transition on the succession talent side of things. And was it simultaneously you were exploring all of these other options?
When I was working with the consultants, I didn't explore much because I knew I didn't want to do it. I was just hitting a roadblock. I mean, all I was doing is getting progressively depressed and ultimately kind of going, well, I guess I can't sell the company. I guess we'll figure out something. I don't know what else there is, but I could not figure out another strategy. There's selling the company and there was an ESOP, and I didn't like any of my options. And it wasn't until I learned about the EOT, and it was actually I was going back and looking at my emails. It was 2 weeks after I learned about the EOT that I came to your stewardship meeting in Frisco, but that was 2 weeks later. And then that's when I really drank the Kool-Aid, because now I'm immersed with 30, 40 other people at different stages. And I was a sponge. I couldn't talk to enough people and ask enough questions about EOTs. And I left there coming back and telling them, this is what we're doing. We are doing this. And they're going, what? What are we doing? Because then I had to bring them up to speed of what I was talking about.
Yeah. Richard, I want to hear about your experience in this. Tell us about your experience going through this process and what was helpful for you about moving at this pace that you guys chose to pursue.
Well, one of the things that I hear about a lot of companies when they move to the transition to an EOT is they say everything changed and nothing changed. And I think that that's the beauty of the employee ownership trust, is that when you move into this new role, the organization can really stay the same in so many ways. But David was really intentional in making sure that moving up until we decided to make this transition, but there was good leadership involved. And you're right, this wasn't a turnkey operation for us. It took a lot of time for us to work through, how do I run the business? I had to learn that from a sole proprietor who really manned the business for 20 years to say, okay, now you're taking over. For that to happen smoothly and to be handed off well, it takes time. So I had a big learning curve when David moved to New Mexico. And it was COVID and it was rough, but it allowed me the time to make some mistakes with David still around. You know, I still had my safety net. I was able to learn how to work with my employees, how to run the business, how to talk to families, how to navigate issues really well without losing that support system. And I think if companies take this model where they're planning way ahead of time, I'm going to make sure that my leadership really understand the business before I make this transition, then they're going to be much more successful, because I had a lot of confidence going into this. And then on top of that, not only did we meet about transitioning to the EOT, we met with our families, so our customers, and let them know what we were doing. We met with our staff and started explaining this process. I will say one of the hard parts about this is that EOTs are not well known. So teaching people what it means can be a little bit complicated. And the structure can be a little bit different from one organization to the next. So with that flexibility comes trying to figure out your own path and your own model. We have found that keeping things really simple has worked best for our company. We haven't changed a whole lot from a leadership structure. And most of what has changed has been up until we did our first profit share, kind of behind the scenes. So now we're ready to really get into ownership and what that means for our employees and dig into organizational change. So that's 9 months into the process. And before that, that's 5 years of me transitioning into this role. So I would say to anybody that wants to move into this transition strategy, that they really start thinking long-term about how they're going to transition this, and that it's not going to be a quick process. A big word that we've been using is evolution. The evolution of our company, it happens slowly, it happens over time, it happens gradually. And I think that's how you build a successful company, is you have something that is going to continue to stand the test of time, which means you prepare for the future.
Well, as Rachel said, we've been a EOT for 10 months now. And when we're becoming an EOT, my big kind of mandate is we're not going to change anything unless the change is because it helps us run the company better. Because, you know, it's one of the things that we try to assure our families, our customers, and our staff is guys, this isn't going to change things, because it's real scary when all of a sudden the company's going to change. So it's real important for us to not immediately go out and change everything or change anything. And we truly went the first 9 months and didn't change a thing. We didn't change who was in charge. We didn't change the way we ran things. We didn't change the operations. Nothing changed in the company, even though we were a different company now as an EOT. That's what we decided to do. I think everybody decides to do it different. And, you know, people struggle over who's going to be on my board of directors, and what about this thing called Trust Stewardship Committee, and what about the Trust Protector, and what? And this is the conversations I have with other people looking at this. They're just so bogged down thinking of all these details. Well, guess what? We did nothing, not a thing. Nothing changed, and nothing has to change. I mean, some things have to change on paper behind the scenes, but that's all it is. It's paper behind the scenes. But organizationally, nothing has changed other than our vision now is greater engagement with our 32 employee owners. So we're putting in place committees so that people can have a seat at the table and make a contribution and feel like they have a role in how the organization operates. And then also talking about growth, because I'm no longer the glass ceiling holding the organization back because I was the owner. Now there's 32 owners. Now they can make it, you know, we're a small company. We're a $4 million company. And last night I was saying, there's no reason why y'all shouldn't be a 5 million. And let's think bigger. Why not be a 10 million? But that's on y'all. It's not on me. But they're young and they're energetic and they're bright and they're very capable. So there's no reason they can't be. They just have to envision it and then embrace it. And so that's what we're working on now, that I think is the biggest change in the EOT is going to be cultural. It's going to be this idea of engagement by employees, which is healthy anyway. It's a healthy, much healthier social capitalistic model.
Yeah. Rachel, I actually want to hear your perspective on this transition as well, because you were both stepping into a new role and a new ownership structure, granted over a period of time, but doing both of those. As a succession leader, tell us about the moment where you felt like this ownership structure is really the right one for us. Like when did that click for you?
When I went to your stewardship circle meeting in Indianapolis. I'm not kidding. Up until that point, I was still trying to figure out what this all meant. And I met with a lot of other business owners and successor CEOs at that meeting, and started hearing about ownership as an idea and how they were going to create a culture of engagement in their company. And it struck a chord with what we're always trying to do at LiveOak, with trying to help grow our staff and create avenues for them to have a greater understanding of our business and what we do. So up until that point, it was kind of a confusing business structure until I went and realized that this was actually a culture that we were building. It was a way that we could not only continue our vision and mission for the company, but that it could go further than that and actually create a way for our staff to continue to be involved and to move up and to grow organically as well. So it fit the heart of what we are as a company, not just a structure on paper. So I think that was one of the biggest things.
Well, I think one thing that's really interesting about how you guys chose to approach this transition is the fact that you did, in addition to a gradual planning, kind of a gradual rollout. And it sounds like you guys really prioritized operational stability first, before thinking about any kind of significant changes. But tell us about what prioritizing that operational stability first allowed you to do from a culture perspective.
Well, again, I think families and staff want stability. When you're saying that you're going to sell the business and David's moving out, I mean, up until COVID hit, I remember meeting with families and them all going, okay, David, what's your plan? What is your plan for the future? And him looking at me going, I think she's my plan. And me going, am I your plan? Okay. But that was really scary. Again, with the business that we're in, we're taking care of people for a lifetime.
Decades.
So we're trying to sell people, not just on, buying a new pair of shoes or signing up for a subscription. We're saying we want you to entrust your loved one with us for the next 20 years. So we have to have a plan that will last at least 20 years. So it was really important to create a succession plan where families could feel confident. And I think same with staff. When you're saying, hey, we want you to continue to grow with the company, they want to know that there's a future in the company. They want to know what that could look like for them. It's really hard to keep somebody around if they think you might sell the company in the next few years. We don't have that problem anymore.
How did the families react when you talk to them about this?
I don't think they got it. I think they were kind of glad that there was some plan in place. And it was one of the things I was starting to experience more and more as I got older and older. I had this one resident who, was a genius. He's had mental health issues, but he had IQ of 160. And I was sitting at his table one day, meeting with him and his father about coming here. And he goes, David, let me get this right. You own everything, right? And I said, yeah, I own everything, but I've got good staff. And he goes, so tell me, what happens to me if something happens to you? I was going, all I can do is shrug. How do you answer that? If you're as an owner and someone is asking you directly, what happens to me if something happens to you? Then it starts really kind of turning the wheels around. What does happen? And what kind of plan does there need to be in place? And then it just ultimately got to the point where, it's irresponsible not to have a plan. I was reading an article on the way over that Mark Hand just wrote about succession planning with families. And he was saying, 66% of all owners have no succession plan in place. And that 74 of them, 74% of them will fail because they just die with the owner. And, that's where I think EOT is perfect. It provides an avenue for this process to occur beyond the owner. And if you want your company to live beyond you, it's kind of like having a will or an estate plan for your family when you pass away. And it's a responsible thing to do. And I think it's real important that owners, and whether they're single owners or not, whether they're elder or not, doesn't matter. The first person who actually really got me interested in this is when I first moved to Santa Fe. I was told about there's one other EOT in Santa Fe called Bicycle Technology International. And so I immediately called up the guy and went over and met with him. And because I had the same 100 questions that everybody has, like, how do you do this? And how do you set up your trust stewardship? And what about this? And what that? He goes, we don't. You don't do any of that, guys? I goes, no, we don't do that. We run it the same way we've always run it. But this guy was about 40 years old. And he was the 7th EOT in the country when he got set up. And the reason he did it was because his business partner died in a motorcycle accident the year before. So now he was on his own and he realized, okay, I've got this large international bicycle technology company. What happens to the company if something happens to me? Well, that becomes that 74% that go out of business. They just go, they get sold on the auction blocks. And obviously I did not want that to happen to the company I'd worked with and I'd started. But the other thing is I felt like I had a much bigger responsibility. Staff, I figured could take care of themselves, but I felt a responsibility for them. The residents, I felt a strong responsibility, and the families, that I had made a commitment. So then it became a responsibility of, all right, I need to make a plan. I need to get something in place so that it can be around for the next 50 years, 100 years, 200 years.
Yeah, our residents build a life here. So having the idea of their entire world changing because David chooses to retire, that is very scary. And not in line with our mission at all. So succession is inevitable, right? At some point, a sole proprietor is going to have to figure out how the company is going to survive them, because at some point they are going to want to move on. So starting that process early, being very intentional about it, will lead to greater success in the long run.
Yeah, actually on that piece. So one of the things I often hear from business owners is that they feel a sense of pressure to do everything at once because there is a sense of responsibility of figuring this out for the longevity of the company. For folks on the call who do feel that sense of pressure to figure things out, what would you encourage them to prioritize?
As far as the process?
Yeah, approaching the process, how to sequence things, kind of how they should be thinking about it.
Obviously, step one is gathering information. And to me, I've learned kind of the hard way to not try to do everything myself. If I want to build a house, I hire an architect and I hire a builder. I don't try to build the house. And so I think the main thing is do everything you can to gather information so you can make informed decisions and feel like you're going in the right direction. The process of elimination is real important. Figure out what you don't want to do first. If you don't want to sell to your competitor, then mark that off your checklist. If you don't want to sell to private equity or venture capital, take it off. You'll narrow down the processes of what's left. And from a social standpoint, there's ESOPs and EOTs. There's also a couple other models that can be considered co-ops and things like that too. But you really need to eliminate what you don't want to do, narrow it down to what you do want to do, and then start gathering as much information as you can. And I think a big part of that is relational. You got to start talking to people like yourself, go to symposiums, get on NCEO's website when they start, we meet on a monthly basis, ask the questions and figure out who aligns with you best philosophically, and what services do you want to buy? What do you need? Big part of that is how big are you? Are you a small company like us at 4 million, or are you a 40 million or $100 million company? And that adds some other complexities to it. So information gathering is critical. Just read, and talk and talk and talk.
At the same time, once you choose, you say, okay, I want to be an EOT. I would say don't get too caught up in making all of the decisions right away or feeling like you have to totally restructure the government of your company, the way that your company is operating, or have all the answers right up front. If you allow this to unfold naturally, you'll realize that half of the stuff that you were freaking out and worried about, that's not even a problem. And then there's this whole slew of things that you just could not account for, you could not predict happening, that you're having to answer. So, you know, you can be diligent and you can try and work through these issues, but trying to have all of the answers before you make a decision is going to lead to you getting overwhelmed and frustrated with the process. And you have to trust that things will kind of unfold naturally and that you'll handle issues when they come up.
Yeah, don't try to have all the answers before you do it or even at the start. Let it roll out. Let it evolve, much like raising a child. You know, they're 2, then they're 3, then they're 4, then they're 5, and every stage is different and it's got different issues. And the ability to pace yourself and know that you're running an ultra marathon. This isn't a sprint. It's not something you're going to get in place and somehow magically the day you become an EOT, everything is different. If it is, you've done it wrong, because it shouldn't be different. It should be very similar and being rolled out on a very gradual basis. At least that's my recommendation.
We've talked to a few companies who totally restructured things when they moved into the EOT, and it did not go well. You know, they had a lot of trouble moving into this process because they're teaching their company something totally and completely different from the status quo. And that's scary and frustrating. And for us, a lot of our staff, we're having the opportunity to teach them about our business and what we do. And that's a big part of ownership for us. But that takes time. You have to take time to teach people about the business before you bring them into the process.
And for us personally, we did not want to do the trust stewardship committee or the board of directors of bringing in outside people, mostly because we've never done it before and it's not broke. So why do it now? We had confidence in the people who are running the company now could continue to run it, but that was our choice.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's really well put. That this is a process that is going to be, to use your word, Rachel, it's an evolution, and bringing it to life is going to take time. I want to talk about a little bit about what this looks like at the company today. So I'd love to hear how, maybe starting with you, Rachel, how has employee ownership changed culture, a sense of leadership at the company over the course of this transition?
I think it's really been interesting to hear how many people have stepped up to the plate and said, all right, I want to learn more. I want to be part of your business. I want to grow. This is really exciting. It's given them a reason to stick around. And David and I talk about, you know, how maybe there's this third model where a third of your people will be really excited about this process and want to engage. A third will be on the fence. I don't really understand what this means for me. I'm not really sure if I'm into it. A third could care less. I'm hoping that that's not the case. I'm hoping that I've got 100% of people who are really engaged in this model. One of the things that we've started to do is our town halls, as David was talking about. It's been an opportunity for us to teach people about the business. So we do open book financing now. And I knew from the get-go I didn't want to just throw a P&L at all of my staff. As David said, a lot of them are in their 20s. And they're just learning about finance and how things operate. So we had the opportunity at our town hall last night to do a very broad picture of how the company spends our money, what our revenue is, what our operational expenses are, and then what our income looks like. And then we're able to teach about how that will look with the profit sharing model that we've rolled out. So it's starting to give people a bigger picture of how our business works. That's really exciting for staff because, you know, they're learning things that I had to learn naturally and organically over 13 years. And our staff who've been with the business for 2 or 3 years are getting this crash course in entrepreneurship and how to run things. So that's really exciting for me. The other thing that we have done is we've started to create committees. So right now we have 3, and we're working on our 4th. One is life enrichment. They're working on activities for our residents to make their lives more enriched, more enjoyable. We've got operations that focuses on HR and finance. And then we've got our culture and engagement committee, and they're all focused on employee ownership. So they're starting to teach other staff about this model and what it means to be employee owners. And then our fourth is going to be growth and development. So as we start to grow our company, we're bringing more people in. This is exciting because before it was just me and David, well, before me, it was just David. He's the only one coming up with the business strategies. He's the only one working towards these bigger goals. Now we're pulling a lot of people in. So when you have 30 heads that are now thinking about the business, thinking about growth, thinking about opportunities, trying to figure out ways to make our residents' lives better, you're going to increase the success of the business exponentially. And also, they're going to feel more engaged, involved. There's way more skin in the game than just being an employee who comes in, runs the ship, and leaves. They are truly engaging in ownership.
Yeah, David, tell us a little bit about your perspective in this process. I mean, how has your role evolved as you've been progressively stepping back without stepping away completely? I mean, you were at the town hall last night, so
Yeah.
tell us a bit about that.
I like to say it's going from being a parent to a grandparent. So I'm now the grandparent. She has to deal with the grandkids, not me. So you get to be the wise one who has opinions and has ideas. I think the hard part for me is to back off and to not get caught in your old roles of getting down into weeds and realize that you need to stay in that consultative role. Rachel and I talk on a weekly basis. We have a scheduled meeting where we talk every week. And the first thing I told her, I think when I came down this time, I said, let's move it to every 2 weeks. And then in about 6 months, let's move it to once a month. I need to back myself off because they've got it. And just out of pure habit, before I know it, I'm down in the weeds and I don't need to be in the weeds. It's not productive for me and it certainly isn't productive for her. I'm not being helpful, even though that's my goal. I don't think it's helpful for her. So unless she asks for it, then I'm going to kind of stay backed off. But the other wonderful thing is it's also like watching your kids grow up. It's fun to watch the process evolve beyond you, because I really do think the potential is so much greater for the company than when I owned it individually. Because when it was me, I only wanted to grow the company as large as I could keep up with, as much as I could manage. And if I couldn't be hands-on and know who all the residents and all the families and all the staff were, I wasn't interested in growing past that. I wasn't interested in empire building. I didn't have the need for, a private jet or any of those kind of things. So I was very satisfied with what I had. They should not be. They should not be satisfied with where they are, because it's much like kind of a layer of an onion. As it grows bigger and bigger, it's, I believe that our employees want an opportunity for growth. They want an opportunity for greater contribution. They want an opportunity for greater recognition. And then finally, they want more money. They're all going to get older. They're all going to, take on more responsibilities and things in their lives, which means for them to achieve their goal. And our mantra is a great place to work and live. And it's in that order, because if it's not a great place to work, it's not going to be a great place to live. And I think the only way it remains a great place to work is they have to be able to grow. So this model to me is, I think, the perfect model of what I think of kind of social capitalism. I think it's the way capitalism should be. And they reap the benefits. They put in the effort, they grow the company becomes more profitable. They move up in the company, they have higher salaries. If they have higher salaries, they make more profit sharing. So to me, that's the capitalistic model where people are truly getting rewarded for contributing more, moving up in the company, making a greater salary, and thus making a greater profit sharing as the company grows. So I'm hopeful that they can, and in many ways, I can now very vicariously live through the growth of the company that I couldn't do because they were just me, but I can support and help them achieving it. So I get to kind of achieve some of my ulterior goals that I had for the company, but couldn't do myself, but I can do with them.
I think that's really well put. Okay, we are going to turn to questions shortly. So folks, if you have questions, feel free to put them in the chat. Before we do, I want to do a round on surprises and lessons. So I want to hear this from both of you. Looking back, what surprised you about this transition, either before or after? What surprised you?
Simplicity and flexibility for me. Again, trying to figure out what the EOT meant and not being able to find a whole lot on it. And then also hearing about all of the different strategies was a bit scary when we first moved into this model. And I guess that's a big surprise, is that it just hasn't been that difficult. We have found a lot of ways to start incorporating ownership and changing our culture, but you don't have to. You can keep things relatively simple and easy and build over time at a natural pace. So that's been a big surprise for me. I think another surprise has been how many staff have stepped up. We've had a lot of really great attendance at our town halls. When I'm going over financing and things like that, I was scared that we were going to just get dazed looks and, okay, you're making me come to a business meeting and I'm not interested. And that's not it at all. People want to know. Mm-hmm. Teach me about the business. I want to understand. Give me the information. So that's really exciting for us to say, okay, our staff, they get it. They want it. And now we have the opportunity to give them this information, and then hopefully they'll act on it. We're pretty big believers that the people closest to the product should be the ones making the decisions. And that's part of what this EOT allows, is that the decision-making stays with the employees who are closest to the product and can hopefully have then the best information, most up-to-date information to make really good decisions on growth and how to maintain a good product.
I think the biggest surprise was just how seamless it was. And it went from what seemed very complex to very simple. And so I would recommend, if anybody finds this real complex, do more homework, talk to the right people, and what you'll realize is how simple it is. And that's the beauty of it, is it's very simple. It really is. It's not complicated, it's not hard, it's not expensive. And if it is, you're probably talking to the wrong person.
Fair, yeah. Okay, let's do lessons learned, and then we'll turn to audience questions. But maybe each of you, what is one lesson learned that you want business owners or succession leaders to keep in mind, outside of the simplicity, which it sounds like you two are aligned on that?
Boy, definitely the two things I've already talked about. One is give yourself plenty of lead time. It's a marathon. It shouldn't be done quickly. And absolutely have somebody in line that can captain the ship. You've got to pass the baton to somebody that you can count on, that can run. And we say get it, want it, and capacity to do it. And then the last one is own it. You got to have someone who has those characteristics. And if you don't have that person, it's hard to do. I don't know how you can do it if you don't have someone that can take over for you in that capacity.
Lessons learned for me. I think that this has been a very intentional process, and it's taken a lot more time and effort to figure out, how do I really explain ownership to my staff? How do I start creating these committees? How do I do open book financing? What are the rules around profit sharing? It seems like, I know we're talking about simplicity, but it seems like, all right, I can just say everybody's going to get profit sharing and then be done with it. And then you start digging in and saying, all right, I need policy here. I need to think this through a little bit deeper. So that's been one of the big takeaways for me, is that. The other is, we work with Health and Human Services, different government agencies. They don't understand EOTs at all. So that was one of the hardest parts, is just explaining the transition to the business to other groups that might be governing bodies that don't have anything in place for this kind of system setup.
That actually tees up one of the questions we have from the audience, which we have some folks joining from the UK, which is great. But they're asking about the lack of familiarity with EOTs. I assume your team was not familiar with EOTs when you guys brought this up to them. Tell us a bit about how that communication went. Did you notice any changes once you started profit sharing, and how did your team really understand this model in transition?
It really is a slow rollout. And I just keep saying the word culture change, because most of us kind of understand what culture change is, how do you change opinions over a long period of time? And once again, you got to take a marathon approach. You're not going to do it quickly. any more than you're going to raise a child quickly. It happens over a long period of time. And I think you've got to take that approach to understand you can't force feed people this in 3 months and they're going to get it and now they're going to do it. So it is a very gradual process where you need to kind of spoon feed people as time goes by and give them progressively more information so they understand it better. And then hopefully in return, their participation will be better. But I think it should not be a short term. And I think that was part of our own naivety was, okay, we're just going to launch this thing, we'll announce it, and everybody will put the hat on and they're ready to go. It just isn't it. People don't change that way. And we're in the behavioral industry. We know behavior changes slowly. Well, it's true with staff too. The change is slowly. So you need to take a long-term approach to it too. And there's no race, there's no rush. I mean, why feel like we've got to, quote, get this in place in 6 months? There's not a hurry to it. So I think taking a long-term gradual approach is best for everybody.
Yeah, so tell us about, here's another related question. Rachel, it sounds like you guys are doing open book accounting now. How was that rollout, going from not sharing much financial information to sharing it? Was that stepped, or did you just dive into the deep end?
Well, we transitioned into this over 2 meetings. So I would say it's been pretty fast. The first was just teaching people, this is what revenue means. This is where we get our income. It was very, very high level. Now we're getting more into the weeds around, this is what our operational expenses looks like. This is how our business operates and why we need to continue bringing in new residents. This is why we need to retain people. And this is how you can contribute to that retention and why it's important. I think the next stage will get more granular into how can staff have a direct impact on our budgeting and our business. Because for profit sharing, it's really important. You want to know, okay, how is my profit share reflective of the total profits of the company? How can I help those grow? So it definitely isn't going to happen overnight, but I would say don't be super scared of it. People like transparency, and I think transparency helps as you're moving into the EOT to feel like, all right, my company's got me. They respect me. They respect my ownership in the company, and they're going to hold my hand and teach me how to understand this, but they're going to do it in a very open way.
Nice. And so related to that, tell us about the profit sharing. Did you guys set up a formula, and how did you structure that?
Yeah, we just kept the KISS principle. We kept it as simple as possible.
Great.
And I got that consult from the other EOT in New Mexico, BTI, and he said they just base it on payroll. And once I started thinking about that, because I'd read lots of different variables I could go into, including a multiplier by seniority and all these different factors, roles in the company and capacities in the company. And I really thought, well, salary or pay is probably the best indication of someone's value in the company. And if it's not, then you need to change your pay. You need to do something different if what you're paying people is not reflective of their role and value in the company. So ours is very plain and simple, just based upon pay. So whatever they make and that percentage of the payroll, that becomes their profit sharing that they get. And then the vesting side is that they have to work with us for 1,000 hours first. So for people who are full-time, that's usually 6 months. People who are part-time, 20 hours, which a lot are students, that's a year. So that creates a little bit of a bar that says not everybody, as soon as you're hired, becomes an employee owner. We think it's important to put in your time, and also you've kind of stayed through all the orientation phases and you're still employed with us and you're making a contribution in the company before you become an employee owner.
Great. All right, we are going to wrap up shortly. Before we do, I want to give each of you a chance to give your parting words. Any final thoughts, lessons, advice you want to share with the audience before we wrap?
I really believe that it's such a personal decision, especially if there's employee owners that are out there debating this. When I first was told about the whole concept of legacy, my response was, I don't care about legacy, because I always thought that was kind of that pat on the back thing. And then one of the consultants I was working with, he said, well, do you care how your company if your company exists and continues the way you built it? I said, well, yeah. And he said, well, that's your legacy. I went, oh, I do care about legacy. So I think a big part of the EOT is, does enough dots get connected in this process to realize that this is how you want to perpetuate your company with your employees running it and operating it and making it as seamless as possible and for their ability to grow it. One of the things that we did is I did owner financing. And some companies do that and some don't. I just kind of doing owner financing for a house. So we have a 15-year note that they're going to pay me back. It makes it a lot more affordable for them. And it's another easy process for them to own the company through buying me out that way. So I think that's the important thing, is that companies need to, you need to do your own deep dive to decide philosophically what is it that you want. And if this matches up for you as an EOT, it's exceeded my expectations. That's all I can say. I thought it would be good, but it's been great.
Yeah, I would say that this is just as much a philosophical transition for us as it is a business transition. We truly believe that our decisions should be maintained with our employees, that they are the ones that should be driving change. They're the ones that should be helping us grow the organization. They're the ones best equipped from it, but also they're the ones that should reap the benefits from this. And this model allows us to do this. As we continue to grow as a company, our staff are going to have greater and greater profit sharing from that. They're going to continue to grow their careers without having to move to other companies. It's going to help with retention. But I think we're creating a really unique culture through the EOT, where our staff are learning more about the business. They're becoming better businessmen and women through this transition. They're able to contribute in other ways outside of just their normal jobs through committees. And I think that as a result, we're going to have a group of people who are so dedicated to LiveOak and its future that we're going to see success just grow and grow and grow. And that's our mission. And we want to keep growing this company and organization. We don't want it to stop with David. I wanted to see a future here, right? I was really invested in making sure I can continue growing with the company, and this structure allowed us to do that.
I can't think of a better place to end than that. I think that's perfect. David, Rachel, thank you guys so much for joining us today to share your story and hard-earned wisdom from this process. I think I'm personally taking away the KISS principle, which I love that you brought up, David. But then also just like the care and intention you guys put into this process to not rush into figuring everything out, but rather letting this evolve along the way. So thank you guys for giving us your time and sharing your story. For folks on, just a brief reminder about us at Common Trust, if you're curious about employee ownership or want to explore any of these options, we'd love to chat with you. As you can tell from these two, there's a really strong owner and operator community for EOTs. So there's a lot of folks who I'm sure would be happy to chat as well. We brought up a couple times Steward Circle, which is an annual conference we run for EOT operators. So if you're interested in that, we'll share information following up about this. And then outside of that, thank you guys. Thank you everyone for joining.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.